I just want to take a quick poll to get an idea of where everyone is with AI. Obviously, everyone has used ChatGPT. Claude. Has everyone used Claude? Has everyone used Hermes? Has anyone used Hermes here? Has anyone used Claude Codes? A lot of people here. Great, awesome. That's fantastic. Codex. Yep. Open Code. Open Claw. Open Claw. Nano Claw. Any of the claws? Okay, cool. So we have a pretty literate audience here. That's great. Obviously, when talking about the AI trough of disillusionment, there is a lot to talk about. There are many ways into this conversation. I would love to talk about all of them, but we only have 45 minutes to an hour today, so I have to choose one way in, and something that I have a lot of experience in and I think could be a really interesting discussion together as a group is LLMs. I know that sounds boring, but it is the heart of what we call AI. So obviously when ChatGPT emerged in 2022, that was like a big light bulb moment for everyone. We were using it when it was just in the OpenAI playground in 2021, when it was just GPT 2 and 3. And we even made our own little ChatGPT clone, and they actually banned us. They shut down our service. But when people first started using ChatGPT, I guess the experience for all of us was, oh my God, this is revolutionary. This is going to change the world. It's magic. And also, it just works. And as we've all discovered in this room, it isn't magic. And it doesn't just work. And there are a lot of subtle reasons for why that is, and I'd like to go into that today. So obviously, when we're talking about AI, there's so much to talk about. AI's been around for 20, 30 years. Diffusion models, reinforcement learning, generative adversarial networks, classical ML, transformers. There are many different modes of AI, but most people just use LLMs, but they don't know it. They think they're using something more advanced, but it's not. It is just a probabilistic next token generator. In terms of the hype, we have been so hyped, it's painful. This is the Gartner Hype Cycle chart. I'm sure you're all familiar with it, well, most of you. I would argue that we are beyond the peak of inflated expectations. That probably happened 6 months ago. And I would say we're on the downslope towards the trough of disillusionment. But there is a slope of enlightenment, and there is a plateau of productivity. And I hope that we can get here. So let's talk about it. I'm going to make some bold claims. And I'm going to say, first of all, that I think most people have no idea how to use LLMs effectively. And I'll tell you why I think that. And the second controversial claim I'm going to make today is that agentic AI is mostly marketing BS. And I'll break that down too. So why should you listen to me? I've been using AI in an extreme way, I would say, probably too extreme, all the way since 2022. So for 5 years now, and I've been like in agent harnesses every day since then, basically. And I put my, I'm a great believer in accelerating the building of software with AI, and so we've built our own complete software at Moose called Portal. It's a super app. It's basically a Slack replacement, but then it does all these other things as well. And every SaaS service that we've ever used, we're like, we'll just rebuild it. What have we got? We've got some video editing, we've got project management, time tracking, budgeting, quoting, HR functionality, CRM in there, a knowledge base. It's been an amazing experience. It is hard to make a piece of software, even with AI coding. There's still the software engineering, and that's something I want to talk about. On top of this kind of super app that we've developed, in a weekend I was able to copy Weavy. I'm not sure if anyone's used Weavy AI, but that's a $200 million business, and I was able to reproduce the core product on a casual weekend. And so we use that internally. We call it Moose Gen Weave, and it works just like Weavy AI did. Similarly, we have a meeting recording app. I know they're a dime a dozen, but they're quite expensive per user if you actually look at them. And we built one that actually connects perfectly into Portal. So it's like an integrated meeting recorder app for us. Not to mention Moose Review, which is a premier product that we offer, which is creative testing, which has been in development for a couple of years now. So I have a lot of experience building software with AI, and I have a lot of experience with the ways that it can fail. So I'm just going to start with the first point. Most people have no idea how to use LLMs. In this room, I think we have some people who know how to use LLMs. So thankfully, I'm not talking to a crowd who's never used one before. Obviously, LLMs are a new class of tool, and I just want to discuss this on a philosophical level because obviously a simple tool like a hammer, it's easy to see what it's good for. It has clear limitations. It's not good for fine motor tasks, for instance. It has instant, reliable feedback in the world, and it has a closed, simple feedback loop. And then I would contend that the LLM is the anti-hammer. It is exactly all of those things, but the opposite. It's not easy to see what it's good for. It has hidden limitations. It will answer confidently and incorrectly. It doesn't give reliable instant feedback on how to use it better. It actively undermines you, and with sycophancy and hallucinations, and it can create over-reliance, disconnection, and even psychosis in some users. I was told by the OpenAI Wrapped in my app that I was in the top 0.01 of users, and I was like, cool. I'm a cool guy.
And you're in psychosis now?
Yeah, I'm definitely in some version of AI psychosis. I'm trying to get my way out of it, which is, I guess, the point of this talk. So, some tools are legible and some are not, and so I think we've struggled with these tools because they're so complex and unknowable. I think this phrase is interesting because if you think of a person as a complex, dynamic individual, minds are complex and it can take years to fully understand how someone works. In a similar way, I think LLMs are kind of like that as well, and I think it's apt that they say it can take up to 5 years to get to know someone. Well, LLMs were released about 5 years ago, and I think we're just getting our heads around why LLMs are so manipulative to us. So I'm just going to give an example of how LLMs work to kind of represent their brain space. Imagine this is like an LLM's brain space, and every dot here is like a neuron in a brain. It's not like that because in the latent space of an LLM, it's multi-dimensional. In fact, thousands of dimensions. But if we kind of brought it down into a 3D dimensional space, imagine this is one model. Now, imagine if you wanted to talk to this model about philosophy. It has been encoded or trained on data, and a section of that data might be trained on philosophical texts. So let's say this green area here. And so talking to this model, I might have a rich conversation with it about philosophy. But model 2, let's see what it has been trained on with philosophy. Just this tiny little area up here. But unfortunately, I as the user have no idea. I have no idea how rich or dense that part of its brain space is. Similarly, model 3, it's a completely different shaped model. And philosophy might be more dense in this little location down here, but again, I have no idea up front what is inside it, and that's why they call them black boxes. In fact, the researchers who work on these things have no idea what's inside them. And they've likened the development of an LLM less to designing an intelligent system and more to the analogy of growing a mushroom. They're organic systems. You provide the substrate, which is the training process, and the data, and you mix them together, and you train for months on hundreds of thousands of GPUs using an extraordinary amount of electricity, and out pops a mushroom, or an LLM. And so that's why the next generation model is not necessarily better. It's just different. It's a different kind of mushroom. I think a really, so just to recap on that, every model is grown from different spores and substrate. We have no visibility on the data that it was trained on, and no model will ever be or could ever be perfect like people. They're just different. Commercial forces, though, are deciding what data goes into future LLMs. And these forces are incredibly powerful, and they're working in ways that are not obvious. And not all mushrooms work for every dish. Choosing the model for the task matters, but how do you know which to use when? How does anyone in this room know when to use a model or not?
When it's approved by your giant corporation.
Wow. That's grim. but real for many people, yeah. There's no shortcut. It's, either you've got a great friend who's a huge LLM nerd and they can tell you, or otherwise you've just had raw experience in using the models and you just know one just happens to be slightly better at X task. In other words, it takes time to get the vibe for the model. And you've probably heard the word vibe being used in AI many times because it's actually the most technically accurate word for getting to know it. It is like getting to know someone. You get a vibe for someone. You get to know them. You also have to get the vibe for an LLM. A great example of this is GPT-4o. Did anyone remember using that one in ChatGPT? It was technically not a very good model. It had a token window of 128K. It was 200 billion parameters. It was an okay model, but people loved it. It just had these quirks, and it kind of talked back at them in a particular way, and it helped people. They formed a bond with it. And I'm not sure if you saw, but there were news articles about people, being very distressed and depressed when it was deprecated. And OpenAI didn't think twice about it because the next generation of models, the GPT-5 models, were better in every way on the benchmarks. They were more intelligent, they were faster, they had more neural connections, parameters. Across the board, they were better, and yet it felt more robotic to talk to. And so there is a great example of a company not knowing that a big part of the value was the vibe. And maybe they didn't get enough time to get a vibe for the new 5 series. This is a graph of something called gradient descent, which is a technique used in machine learning where you're trying to, it's complicated, but basically I brought this up because it's a good visual analogy for how LLMs work. This is not how they work. They work in multi-dimensional space. But if you could imagine asking a question, and let's say you're starting at the top and you've asked a question, and like water running down a mountainside, it wants to answer the next token in the most predictable way, and due to the topology of its mind space, it wants to run down into this lowest point. And the lowest point is the answer. That's the answer that it gives you. But this is a really great way to demonstrate that if you ask the same question twice, you can get different answers each time, because there's a different probability of it going in one direction or the other, and then it spills out into a completely different answer. That is, for me, a really good way to think about the vibe of an LLM. And so for every question that you ask it, you're starting at the top of a different mountain, and there's a different set of invisible topologies, and you don't know what they look like until you try it. And the GPT-4o topologies would be very different to the GPT-5 topologies. And yet, when you look at the benchmarks, and to be clear, I think we have a real problem in the world or in the industry at large with benchmarks. They're just so, it's like BMI. It's like you can't really tell if someone's health based on their BMI. You can't really tell what's going on just with a raw intelligence score or speed or cost per task. The industry obviously cares about these things because that's what they're increasingly being used for. Commercial tasks that require just raw, narrow IQ. So this brings us to the concept of spiky intelligence. If you've kind of been in the AI sphere and you've heard people talk about this, it's this non-intuitive concept that LLMs have a very particular type of intelligence. So I'll just quickly jump to the next slide. This is the spiky intelligence of humans. They're just different. So when talking to an LLM for the first time, if you're inexperienced, you might think, oh wow, it's like me, it can do things like me. No, it can't. It does certain things terribly. Like for instance, physical intuition, it's got none because it doesn't exist in the world. It only sort of knows things physically because of the symbols that we use in our language. And our language has constructed a sort of physical simulation proxy, but it's not really. But they're really good at coding, incredible at coding, incredible at summarizing, as we all know. Very bad at counting. You give it a simple counting sum and it just fails. Factual recall, very good within proper context windows. Translation, very good. Common sense, terrible. Novel ideas, terrible. This is something I will stand on my soapbox about. They're terrible at novel ideas, and I personally think they're just below average writing. It's not that great. But humans, not so good at factual recall, not so good at translation unless they're professionals, not so good at summarizing, great at novel ideas, great at planning, great at physical intuition. We live in the physical world, obviously, so it's very different. But this is what spiky intelligence is. And so what spills out from this are things that LLMs cannot do and should not do. And I regularly see people trying to use them for these things. So if you've ever tried to get it to come up with original ideas, they're so cringe. They're so cringe. They're just so derivative. They just spill out of the probabilistic middle. Good creative writing, awful. Never get an LLM to do your creative writing for you. Maybe to clean it up, maybe to help you with some ideas. Original art direction, they ain't doing it. Style, taste, or artistic vision, philosophical thought, nope. Common sense, long-term planning. If you can encode a document with a really good plan, they can do pretty good planning, but not in the world long-term planning. I'll get onto nanoclaw in a second. Sorry, OpenClaw. Does anyone relate to this in what they've tried to do? So the AI labs are increasingly building LLMs for these things alone. Raw IQ, coding, science tasks, general knowledge work, agentic work. Not for any of those other things. Obviously that they are making huge progress in those domains. If you focus on raw IQ, you're going to get raw IQ improvements. Did anyone get a chance to use Fable 5 before it was deprecated? What was your vibes on Fable 5?
Beautiful.
Incredible. I used Fable 5. It was just exquisite. It would provide such amazing responses, so dense with information that it started to get to a point where I was like, I actually can't pass the information. I have to reread this 3 times to understand what it's saying. Very, very, very intelligent model, but probably terrible at coming up with creative ideas. Anyway, for political reasons, we won't talk about why it was taken down. That's a whole nother conversation. I'd love to do a presentation on that, actually. But to show that we've made heaps of progress in terms of the raw IQ. Now, I just want to talk about some of the technicals of LLMs that you should know about if you're using these models, because they do actually have an impact on the results you get. So I'll just go through these. I'm going to skip to the next slides because I'm going to demonstrate each one. But you have parameters, model types, context windows, and the harnesses. So parameters, you can think of them like neurons in a brain. The more you have, the more intelligent the brain is, the larger the brain, for instance. The points are neurons, the connections are parameters. You might have heard of models being referred to as a 200 billion parameter model, which I said previously. That's GPT-4o. The GPT, so Opus 4.8, 1.5 trillion parameters. That is a huge jump between those two models. But then Fable, as we just discussed, was the first of its kind at 10 trillion parameters. So another 10x jump in terms of the number of neurons. I mean, that model requires so many graphics cards to run. You could imagine, I don't know because I haven't looked into it, but I would imagine hundreds and hundreds of GPUs just to run one LLM model. So that's important. If you're ever using an open source model, the more parameters, generally the more intelligent, the more difficult it is to run. And that gets into a discussion about open source models, running your own models. For instance, if you're a business and you want data sovereignty and you want to be able to prevent your data from going overseas, you'd love to run your own model locally, but you'll never be able to run a 10 trillion parameter model. You'd need hundreds of millions of dollars in CapEx just to get the equipment to run that. The other thing that not many people know about is the structure of the LLM, whether it's known as a mixture of experts model or a dense model. And again, using the examples that we've just discussed, GPT-4o was a dense model. So it had less neurons, 200 connections, 200 billion of them, but it would fire kind of all of them at the same time, or at least it would be able to access all within the same turn. A mixture of experts model was GPT-5. It was technically a much larger model, 1.5 trillion tokens, but only 100 billion of those connections fire at any one time. That's much more efficient. It means you can get more intelligence over more topics of discussion, but it's never connecting all those topics at once. And so the difference between the two LLM types is one kind of feels a bit more like it's on mushrooms, and one feels more precise and focused. And so that's why GPT-5 felt so kind of for a better word, autistic to talk to. It's like, I'm going to tell you about the math problem right now, and here's the math problem, and there it is, solved. So technically better, but sometimes you want a dense model. It's a different experience. And the context window. This one's so important. For people who complain of errors or hallucinations, you probably have just exceeded your model's token window. So every model has a token window. They call them 128K or 256K. That's 128,000 tokens. A token is roughly a word, 1.3 words. So GPT-4o had 128K, and you could do a long chat in there, no problem. But if you try to paste the Bible into ChatGPT, it's only going to be able to read like the first, I don't know, 50 pages or something before it gets context rot, which is it can no longer refer to any of the data that you put in because it can't see it. It only has like a sliding window of attention. And worse, when you fill up that sliding window of attention, it can start to become garbled and then just start printing gobbledygook, essentially. Now, today, models have 1 million token context windows. That's the Opus series. Gemini did it first, and then GPT 4.1 famously still does it. And this obviously means you can put a lot more data in the context window and still get coherent results. But there are subtleties to it. Like, you can't just put 1 million tokens in and get a perfect response. You can actually probably only put in about 70% of the token window because you still need room to converse about that data you put in. So you still need to have the conversation in the remaining token space, and then you're probably starting to exceed. So you can actually probably only put in about 60 to 70% of the token window before your conversation starts to degrade and it just starts hallucinating and lying to you. So if you've ever had frustrating chats with an LLM and it's hallucinating, it's one of two things. One, it doesn't have the data in its training data set, or you've exceeded the token context window. And if you're using a harness that doesn't tell you that, you're working in the dark. And so it's very important to know what it is at all times. And then the final thing is the harness. What does this have to do with AI? It's the perfect visual metaphor. The horse is an LLM. And the harness is the software that you put around the LLM. So LLMs, they can just spit out raw tokens for you, but they can go off and do wild things. So you need to rein them in. You need to put on the blinders so they don't get distracted by unrelated topics. That is what a harness is. In practice, it's a piece of software, like this, like the Claude app. The Claude app is a harness. Inside, you're talking to Opus 4.8, which is the model, but the software around the model allows you to do things like import files, text-to-speech, voice-to-text, deep research, all the different functionalities that you're used to in these softwares. And the reason you kind of become hooked on them is because the harness is really good. It handles your files seamlessly. It just seems to work. That's the harness design. For instance, here in Claude, you'll notice that I've switched between the two tabs. There's chat and co-work. And there's also code as well. I'll get into that in a sec. But basically, these are different versions of the harness. The chat is the simple version. The co-work version is a version which allows you to work in folders on your computer and interact and modify files. So they've tried, I think unsuccessfully, to communicate that. I think most users are very confused by these three tabs, but that's just to say that it's different versions of the harness for different tasks. So we have the model, we have the harness. The harness allows you to do the things: context management, inputs, outputs, your tool use, your actions, your code execution, and connecting to things with MCPs, web search, deep research, etc. And pretty much every AI product, unless they have their own proprietary LLM, it's just a harness. That's the product. There's OpenAI, there's Anthropic, there's the open source Chinese LLM providers, but there's only a handful of actual LLM makers. And the rest of it is just a nice wrapper over said LLM. If anyone has used, has anyone used Pi? Pi's amazing. Pi is what drives OpenClaw. It's a very minimalist version of Claude Code. I've been getting my like custom Pi setup going. It's pretty cool. Hermes is the coolest kid on the block at the moment. What it does is it has a mechanism by which it sort of dreams, and it kind of reviews all the chats you've had in the day, and then it tries to encode information about you so that the next time you come back to the task, it's written all these new skills for you. It's complicated, but people who use it love it. And then Portal, the software that we've developed here at Papermoose, that's another harness. But we use open source models, and I would love to talk about that if we have time. Obviously, no harness is perfect because they are built around a different shape, a different thing you're trying to do. And so you just have to decide as the AI wielder which you need and for what purpose. So my favorites are Claude Code and Codex. I switch between them interchangeably. This is what they actually look like. This is them running in the terminal window. If you've never used the terminal, that might be a bit scary, and so you would use the Claude app co-work or code feature. But these are the full featured versions, and you just interact with your computer like this. I spend most of my day in a terminal. Just a last point on models constantly spouting. You're absolutely right to have flagged that. Aside from context rot, we have what I would call data paucity hallucinations, which I mentioned briefly, but it's just if you're talking about a topic that it has seen millions of times and has lots of data encoded in, it's probably going to give you correct information. And if it's a topic which doesn't have a lot of information encoded in the model, it's still going to be as confident in its response, but it's completely wrong. So that's a data paucity hallucination. The real challenge for us as users is the LLM doesn't know what it doesn't know. And that is a huge product flaw, in my view. I think they really should have tried to work that out, but I have come to understand that I think it's fundamentally impossible. I do not think they can ever get an LLM to tell you that it doesn't know. There are techniques that they're bringing out, but yeah, I think it's always going to be a challenge. I could go into a lot more technicals of LLMs, but those are the most important things. Obviously, open versus closed source. There's a huge discussion in the industry at large about whether or not you should use closed models. If you're a business, there's a lot of incentive to use open source models because they're cheaper to run, probably sometimes 10 times cheaper to run. And you can run them on dedicated service providers that don't store your data. That's a really key thing for a lot of businesses. Data residency and sovereignty, multimodal, and importantly, why you should never let LLMs do your thought leadership for you. I truly believe in that. Okay, on to my second point. Agentic AI is marketing BS. So Jensen Huang, CEO of NVIDIA, one of the biggest, well, the biggest company in the world, valued at over $5 trillion now because of AI. Last year in CES said, AI agents are the new digital workforce, a multi-trillion-dollar opportunity. The age of AI agentics is here. He's obviously extremely bullish about it because that means people will buy more NVIDIA products. He is incentivized to sell the dream and services of any product that churns as many AI tokens as possible. Agents use a lot of tokens, as anyone who's in this room has used them know. So what is it, just for anyone who's not familiar? It's an LLM. Agentic AI is an LLM, but it's in a feedback loop, and it has tools. So the sensors are, it can read files on the computer, it can look at your documents, it can then act on those documents, it can edit files, and then it goes into a feedback loop until it's completed the goal. The goal, importantly, being provided by us externally. Please do X. Okay, I'll go do X. I'll find the file and I'll edit the file. That's an AI agent. But I guess one of the things that really excited the world to the possibility of AI agents was just connecting that to a messaging app. As soon as you can message your LLM in a loop, it somehow feels magical. It does. And so if you're familiar with OpenClaw, that's exactly what that was. This is how I talk to my agents. I just have a Telegram app, and it's just full of agents, and they all do particular things. I have one to manage a Cloudflare account and websites and all sorts of things. And they just have a dedicated task, and I just chat to them, and they're like, done. I've done the thing. It's amazing. It's an amazing experience. And just to be clear, I actually don't use OpenClaw here. I use one called NanoClaw if anyone's keen on chatting about that. But it uses the native Claude code harness under the hood. These agents are amazing. They do feel really cool to use, but they are massively overhyped. Because they feel magical to use, people have been expecting the world of them. But you can't expect the world of something like an OpenClaw agent. So we set up an OpenClaw agent when it first came out. A few of us at Moose were using it, and it makes a website for you. It does this, it does that, it sets up schedules, it edits your calendar, it checks your email, it does all these crazy things, and then a week later it breaks. And it breaks in a catastrophic way. Like it deletes your emails, it just stops working for some inexplicable reason. I have to go into the computer and like fix the problems in the terminal, and like, just as of yesterday, I'm pretty sure Nick messaged me, he was like, is OpenClaw down? I'm like, yep, it's down. These systems are not magic. They work in a very precisely specific way, and you've got to babysit them. So I'm not sure if anyone remembers, but in February, OpenClaw became famous because someone created a social media site for the Maltese, as they were called at the time. And all these AI agents joined this social media and then started posting on this social media site. And it got in the news headlines because there were articles like, how are we going to eradicate the humans? And let's start our own language. And it was a social media platform only for these AI agents. And I remember talking to friends and family, and we were all feeling amazed and delighted and maybe a little bit afraid, because we were like, wow, this is happening so quickly. We didn't realize that this moment would come this year. The AI takeoff, is this really the moment? But no, it's a mirage. They didn't have agency. A user prompted them to go to the site and told them to post there, and usually provided them, an angle on what to post. And so what felt like was them having incredible agency was actually just a mirage. So I think that was a big learning for us. And for me, it really started to crystallize this idea that LLMs don't exist in the world. I know that sounds super obvious. They don't have but to be more precise, they don't have a world model. They are based on language. Language is a system of symbols. We encode into our language symbols of the world, like fire is hot, for instance, but it isn't the world. It is a subtle representation of the physical world at best. So I think this is a really key point to understand. I just want to break down the different types of agents for you. So a really basic agent would be something that it senses, it interprets the senses, and it acts. A very simple mechanical mechanism. I would call it an automaton. A weak agent is what we have today, which is agentic AI, which is it has an externally provided goal, senses into a core, it acts on the world in a recursive loop until it achieves said goal. But I think the world thinks that AI agents are this. I think most people out there who've heard about agentic AI think that AI agents are a being with a self, with a world model, and with their ability to set their own goals. Like a person. This true agent is a person, if you want to distill a person down into such a constraint. There is a fundamental leap between these two. And I think it's too easy to conflate AI agents as being this when they're actually that. So just one slide of philosophy I think is really important. Heidegger back in 1927 wrote a book called Being in Time, where he talked about this concept of Dasein, which in German is being there. That's what it means. And the concept was the being for whom its own being is at issue. And you define it in 3 ways. Thrownness, which is a really difficult word to get your head around, but basically it's you exist in the world as if you've been thrown, you have a velocity, you have a direction, you have a history you didn't choose, you have projection from that point of which you've been thrown. You are trying to press into the world of possibilities with your own being. You have projects, you have things to focus on and care about. And a being toward death. It can all end, which is why anything matters at all. This is the core of motivation. And so that's why in the previous slide I put in the core of the self some Dasein. I actually ran an experiment. I got the most intelligent models I could, and I told them, you are Dasein. You know, here is a sandbox, just be there. And I wanted to see what an LLM would do if it was just there. And it didn't really do anything. It was like, oh, I'm just here, I'm just here. Great. Now what should I do? I'm like, I don't know, you tell me. And it just sort of flapped around, and it was in that experience that I saw that it really can never be there, all there, if you know what I mean. It's a bit hard to get your head around, but I truly believe it, that LLM technology is never going to make that jump, ever. Maybe some post-LLM technology will. A post-LLM technology built around the concept of a world model, and there are some people in the field working on that. But we're talking, I don't know, maybe I shouldn't make a year prediction. It'll probably be wrong, but LLMs are not it. You know what else is a weak agent? One of these. This has the same agency in the world as an agentic AI. It has inputs, cameras, sensors. It has a means to actuate on the world, its little spinny brushes and its little vacuum. And it has an externally provided goal, clean my floor. And it does a great job. It automates that process for you, and you can go away and do something else, and it makes you more productive. That's what AI agents do. And that's what this cute little robot vacuum does. So the world has gotten so excited about AI agents. Did it get this excited about this? No. So I think we're kind of in this, I think we're all in a little bit of this AI psychosis, at least markets, investment markets are in AI psychosis. Weak agents do not replace people. A person originates their own goals, owns the outcome, carries the stake. But weak agents can do something, and that is they can replace a chunk of a workflow, which is a bounded specific task you can hand off, delegated, but hasn't been generated by them. That's key, because I think a lot of people think, oh, I can just create an OpenClaw agent and I can tell it to make my life better. And it will try and generate its own goals, and they're always bad. They're just bad. It cannot do that by itself. Now, this leads us to the topic of, do I think there's an AI bubble? Do we think there is that these huge companies which underpin our entire modern economy are overvalued based on this one belief? I believe so. I believe so. I would love to talk more in depth about that at another time. So I would just like to distill some of what I've just discussed here into some succinct tips. So the first is that agentic AI is real, but massively misunderstood and overhyped. It is an LLM in a harness. Feels like magic, which is why the entire world has AI psychosis. The key unlock for agentic AI is that it can access files on your computer and work with them. Code files, spreadsheets, renaming bulk files, writing scripts. If you're someone in this room who hasn't done that before, it really is transformative. You know, if you've got this long spreadsheet you want to work on, use a Claude code, use a codex, point it at a folder with a spreadsheet in it. You can do amazing things with it. That is the most useful thing you can do with AI currently. If you want to use agentic AI, as I said, use Claude Code, Codex, or OpenCode. Obviously, Anthropic, OpenAI, and this is an open source project, and you can plug your own open source models into it. It's a little bit frustrating because they're not as good as the closed proprietary American companies at the moment. If you can't handle using the terminal command line interface on a computer, then OpenAI offers the Codex Mac app, and Anthropic offers the Claude co-work feature in their Claude app, which are watered down versions of the CLI versions. You can delegate discrete tasks to these LLM harnesses. And the software that I showed you at the beginning of this presentation, mostly coded by AI. I think you can get 20 times productivity as a software engineer. And I say software engineer and not a coder because you as a software engineer then have to be thinking about the architecture, the design of the system, and ensuring that the code fits neatly and doesn't have bugs, and you've got to be a very, very active maintainer. But in terms of the amount of software that you can produce, actually I would say even more than 20. Like you could probably get a 50x increase in productivity as a software developer with these tools. But it's not magic, and it doesn't just work. It requires constant scrutiny and reviewing of the code. AI agents are not coming for your job, despite what I feel like the pervasive feeling is in the world. But AI wranglers are coming for some jobs. And those are people like me with like me wielding multiple terminals at the same time with 10 different tasks on the go. I think that software engineers, they won't go jobless. In fact, they'll become more in demand because they'll be able to do 50 times what they were able to do before, if they're able to adapt to the new tools. So software engineers are going to increase in demand. AI wranglers, I can't think of a better term for that. AI wranglers, I think, maybe should be the official job title. I would say if you're in a role where you feel like your job is made up from discrete workflows and that an AI wrangler could come through and automate those workflows, absolutely, if you're thinking about job security, consider becoming an expert in at least a section of using one of these tools. Like, they could be very useful to you. And being an AI wrangler is increasingly going to become a highly sought after skill set. LLMs and therefore AI systems have spiky intelligence just like we do. And having a mental model for the different types of intelligences is going to be really important for us as a society. And we don't talk about it. As I said, I think the way we benchmark AIs is like BMI. It's way too simple. So we're going to become more aware of the different types of intelligence. And also, we'll get used to what LLMs are terrible at. We need to be skeptical about the data they are trained on. Unfortunately, there is no transparency about this from the AI labs. So the only way to find out is through raw experimentation yourself. We need to learn to navigate the fundamental attributes of these limitations, the model size, context window management, and get vibing. Each model has its own uniquely shaped internal topography. To use any model effectively, you need to talk with it and experiment to get the vibe. And just as a final little point here, we need to try not to make AI slop. We've all done it. I've done it. When you're first using a tool, you can produce, if it's generative image or video, you can go, wow, I can't believe I made this amazing thing. But if you put in the bare minimum effort, it's going to look like everyone else's version of that. And we are surrounded by it, and I think it degrades us all. Slop is made by lazily using these tools. So as artists, as craft people, as anyone doing a task with AI, we still need to put in the same amount of effort. It's not going to it shouldn't do your job for you. It should allow you to do more. I mean, I think that is what is being revealed to us as how this technology works. So don't make slop. Cool. Let's now discuss. We have probably 10, 15, depending on when you have to get to work. So yeah, does anyone want to?
Thank you, Josh. Questions? Is everyone feeling more anxious or less anxious?
Well, a broad question is, what are your clients, what are they feeling, what are they thinking about this topic?
They typically only have very nascent hands-on experience with the tools, and so are just in that phase of feeling like it's magic. and terrifying. But they haven't crested over the hype cycle into the trough of disillusionment. They haven't experienced like, oh, actually, if I want to get good outputs with this, I have to generate 1,000 different versions and I have to work for hours at it. And they haven't experienced that. And so a lot of clients are looking for a partner or a guide who's been into that trough and has been in that trough a long time. But I would say the level of sophistication around the usage of tools is remarkably low for all the hype, crazily enough. Yeah.
Do you think that the argument you made about AI wranglers, do those people exist for creative production as well? Like, do you
Absolutely.
So yeah, the way that you described it is you would never let AI come up with certain ideas and do its own creative development and those kind of things. But someone with these tools, like you, there's such a variety of sort of discussion that I hear from no, that would never be possible, it's ridiculous, it's slop, to if you're spending a single dollar on creative production, you're a complete fool. Like, what's your view on where we are in the creative wrangling timeline with creative in regards to production?
Well, first of all, doing production with AI is extremely labor intensive. It requires a lot of work. It requires it's like being in a sweatshop. You're just like generating, tweaking, generating. It's not easy, and it's actually really hard to navigate all the different tools and how fast they're changing. And you are having to make taste-based judgments on, was this output better than this output? Hopefully, as the operator, you're operating with taste and you're choosing the best outputs, and you're often working with like a series of bad choices often. As the models get better, they're getting better, but it is a slog. Do you have any thoughts on that, Nick?
Yeah, I'd just add that I think the experience we've had in the studio is, obviously our background is in production, so we're applying into the prompts are, what camera lens is it? What are the actual technical, what's happening with the actor, what are they experiencing in this moment? So you're giving them direction like you would a director, and you're doing casting, you're doing all of those same traditional production steps, but you're doing it just in Moose Gen, but it's exactly the same steps and the same traditional process, just truncated down. So I think it still requires that underlying knowledge of what makes a good movie, what makes a good shot, because otherwise you get that stuff that looks kind of like stock.
Yep.
Yeah.
What do you think the AGI moment will be like for you? What's your prediction?
Well, unfortunately, AGI is such a broad term, and everyone defines it differently. I'd be curious to know how you define AGI. What do you think it is?
Yes, it's that moment of how people felt that magic when chat came out first. And obviously, it's a very marketing thing that they all push for, which is everyone's chasing the race of the AGI. And yeah, everyone has their own definitions. I don't really know. I think that third slide where you had the box and I'm like, could that be an AGI moment at one stage, or what was your prediction?
So, do everyone remember the Turing test? Like the Turing test, like our whole lives we were like, oh my God, wouldn't it be amazing if in our lifetimes we could see the Turing test pass? And it just came and went, and almost nobody noticed. And it was this, you can talk to a model and you can be fooled that it's a person. AGI, I think the labs have modified the definition of it to serve their commercial needs. I think the original version of AGI, artificial general intelligence, is an intelligence that exists in the world and can operate with a world model. That's my view. That's probably my definition. And so from that point of view, I don't think we are anywhere close to AGI. Some people in the industry argue that the current level of LLMs is AGI. I just disagree. Yeah. Sorry, yeah.
What are your thoughts on responsibilities as devs and producers and users of these tools with regards to environmental concerns?
I was just talking to a colleague in the kitchen earlier. For instance, water usage of data centers. When you're water cooling a computer, you have a water cooling loop, and yes, you use a lot of water. There's a lot of water in the data center, but it's not like you're spewing the water out into the street. It's in a loop. You cool the computers. It goes into a cooling tank. So maybe I'm missing something there. Water usage, I'm on the fence about. Electricity usage, obviously huge. Huge consumers of electricity. I thought that the world would get its act together and get like on the renewable energy train and really get this going. But when I discovered that Elon Musk's XAI were running their Grok data center by pulling in 18 semi-trailer gas turbines, that broke my heart. Like I was like, I cannot believe that any company who cares about the renewable energy future is doing that. In fact, they had so many gas turbines working at such a high capacity that the neighboring town were complaining of like gas emissions, like in their neighborhood. I mean, that's crazy. So I think data centers are not going away. They're very important. We do need them, but there's going to be huge strains on society, and I unfortunately think it's going to be a really big problem that continues to get worse because with, for instance, the Fable 5 model that I was talking about earlier, that requires so many GPUs to run one instance of that model, and they're only going to get bigger and more power intensive. And I think the world has hugely underestimated the amount of electricity it needs, and it's not a tech problem. You can't solve electricity overnight with some new fandangled product. It's like infrastructure, it's government, it's policy, it's construction, and that is slow.
Has it gone beyond the point of no return, that tipping point which everyone talks about? You need more electricity to fuel the demand, the power, blah, 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 but the alternative just can't generate that. So you need to have your natural fossil fuels to generate electricity. So
yeah, and that's why the big gas and oil companies, their stock prices are going through the roof because people are realizing, we need that baseload power. We do not see renewables powering these data centers for the next 10 years at least. Yeah. Like, it's crazy. I have a theory. Yeah, go on.
Well, if it's still talking about energy,
I was going to talk about it more in relation to the value of these companies and the cost of AI. Should I just mention that? So obviously, if you use Claude Code, I'm sure people have a subscription. If you want to use it meaningfully for code, you've got to have the Max subscription, which is a subscription service that costs $200 USD a month. For $200 USD a month, they're currently subsidizing up to something crazy like $7,000 of actual usage. Now you tell me how that makes sense. If you're using it as a power user and I'm using $7,000 worth of credits, why am I only paying $200? It's because the industry is in absolute psychosis. And OpenAI and Anthropic are rushing to go public so that they can pay out their early investors. And then I think after they go public, they're going to start charging for the actual per token usage of their services. And when that happens, I don't think people are going to be willing to pay $7,000 a month for an LLM wrapper, even though it's really cool. Yeah.
Off the back of that, how do you see local generation coming in? Obviously, I've never got my head around why VRAM's so important on one specific thing and why you can't sort of come up with a system with more unified memory to do that. And I'm guessing we probably haven't really had an idea.
The VRAM is for the context window. Yeah. So it's for that short-term memory that all of the nodes can access super quickly. And they need to access it across hundreds of dimensions in latent space. So you need the fastest access to your data. That's why VRAM is so important. That's why the whole world has gone VRAM crazy, and computers are really expensive now.
And how do you see that sort of getting more localized so you can actually put things in your garage?
Let's pray that China comes up with some innovative new technology like DeepSeek, but then the next versions of DeepSeek, because that will be the only way that we can democratize the technology and have your own server in your own garage. I've been trying to build my own local system, and I'm researching like every week. It is currently not feasible or possible. But I've heard recently that GLM 5.2, which is an open source Chinese model, by the way, the American companies aren't providing open source models, the Chinese companies are. I think the business model there is a scorched earth tactic. If they can undercut the profitability and the competitiveness of the American companies, then the American economy will collapse, literally, because they're too big to fail. And then China gets a geopolitical advantage. I think that's the game plan here.
bit of a subject change, but excluding papers, are there any other like brands or businesses or organisations that you point to that are using AI really well, either internally, like just as assistants in the production of their things, or actually in terms of like the actual output that they're using for advertising content, whatever?
Define really well.
Whatever you define. I mean, like, is there anyone else we can point to as a good example of making good stuff using these tools?
Or do you think it's more focused on independence rather than big holdcos?
Can I say something controversial? I don't think anyone's using it really well. And I don't think it's actually providing that much value at the moment. Hence why I kind of want to talk about it. Not many people even know how to use the tools, let alone produce good outputs. Probably the best stuff I've seen is like on social media, you know, with people making like really creative short films and stuff, like the artists who are really pushing the technical limits of the tools.
Interesting, I think from the whole code point of view, is that you were mentioning before, you've got to still act like a producer until that and ready to do all of that kind of thing. I think the mistake of the whole code is they're saying, right, it's an efficiency drive, so we're going to remove this level. Yeah. To be able to use it, you've still got to know how to drive the bus. And they're removing that knowledge. Now that's going to bite you in the butt.
I just want to build on that. So the point I was going to make was, I don't care about the hype, this is living in class humans. We've all been around long enough and done this in analog. Some of us started off in DOS and learned Windows. The generation coming through now who is heavily reliant on this doesn't have that skills, doesn't have that ability to ask the questions. Is there a point where AI will die because there won't be people like us to be able to question it and get the... So right now, because of our knowledge and skills, we can continue the question and get good shit out of it. But if people coming out don't have the skills and they've never done it, that's quite dire.
Yeah, it's a serious problem. And I would contend that the current systems need an expert to run them. You cannot create good software unless you know what the software is and how to engineer it and structure it.
No, I don't think that's very far away, because if you look at companies who aren't hiring graduates, they're wanting to hire people who've got 3 or 4 years of experience. Well, graduates coming out now aren't getting the experience. So I actually think sooner rather than later we're going to have a problem in terms of either we're going to be producing crap or it's going to be useless.
I think you're right.
Things like leading, for example, that have been completely abstracted from printmaking into fonts. I think there's a possibility that some of those skills might get abstracted along the way as well. I'm also quite skeptical about a lot of these elements, but I think that there is a chance that some of those things will just change the way that they are.
I also think that you're going to get, like, that skill will start to fragment. Like, for anybody over the age of 40, who the hell would have thought you'd have an automatic car license? There was even be that need, because that skill is gone. If you want that, you've actually got to go back and learn it. So this thing where you've got that kind of knowledge gap, there will be, people will function without that. And if you want it, you've actually got to go over here and finish that here. That's, I think.
So obviously we've almost run out of data to train the models on. And if high quality data is not being generated in the future, then where do LLMs go? And I personally think nowhere. I think we're reaching, close to max LLM technology. There will be some kind of new technology, a world model technology. I think the next gen of AI, which by the way is not in sight at all, no one has anything like this in the labs, but an AI that is able to learn on the fly, I think that would be the type of LLM, the type of AI to take us to AGI and beyond to some terrifying new heights.
So the reality is it's an assistant, not a replacement.
Absolutely, it is a workflow generator and should be treated as such.
That's not going to help with the share price.
No.
I've never watched.
No, they're selling a hyped dream, which is beyond what the reality is. The reality is still amazing. It will be worse than the GFC.
Can I ask, is that, as you mentioned, is that where the recursive model breaks down? Or there's just suddenly no more novel ideas, nothing new created anymore that the LLMs are feeding off?
Maybe the next generation will love that. Maybe slopcore will be a thing. The sloppier the better,
The years ago, it was Photoshop was the thing, and that was the whole thing. I got a label in Photoshop, and it got to a point where everything looked so Photoshopped that people walked away and said, "Make me look real."
Yeah.
Do you think that you'll ever get to the stage soon where government or somebody will actually need to step in and have some sort of, I don't know if the word's compliance and things like that, because there's so much misinformation being given out into the market. Like at the moment, I was reading the board on the train, the ATO is suffering from, over half of people falling foul of their tax returns using AI.
Oh wow, data inaccuracies.
The information being given is incorrect.
Wow.
At what point do you think that there needs to be citation, some sort of governance on it, or where does it become acceptable to say, oh, I made a mistake because that told me to do it?
It's become a socialist economy.
Well,
That's a whole other.
because we work with the National AI Centre, and I think the federal government is struggling just like every other corporate business, except they're probably even further behind. So they are just totally in the dark with what to do, and so yes, but how long until that happens?
I think if that were to happen, it could be handled like a public health crisis, like the effect of smoking, for instance. Like people will see that it has massive health effects, psychosis health effects, an over-reliance on it thinking for you. The quote that I'm sure some people have heard in the room is that you can outsource your thinking, but you can't outsource your understanding. And it's just so it's hard to think. Humans don't like thinking. We expend energy when we think about something seriously, and so it's so tempting, so easy just to let an LLM do it. And especially if you're not familiar with the material or you're not a tax expert and it produces tax returns for you, it looks legit. You're like, wow, that looks amazing. That would have taken me hours, but it's all wrong. It's wrong because you're not a tax expert and you don't know. So I think increasingly, with our children, we're going to have to be very careful about ensuring that they don't abdicate their thinking to these models. I think it could be treated like a health crisis. It's something we all have to be very aware of.
This isn't very well thought out, but I was just thinking about, I don't know if you're across Jordan Scopus's Slunt Hunt, which is, it's got Screen Australia funding. It's, so basically she put together this sounds like anthropomorphizing it, but she put together a large language model in the character of that lizard son Slunt, and she kind of bounces off it, and then physically animates the character in the world. Is there room to think of LLMs as collaborators instead of replacements, as a way to think of them productively in creative work that isn't taking away from the role of human artistry?
That's exactly how they should be thought of. And actually a little bit less than collaborators. They should be mind extenders, cognitive exoskeletons, as some people have said. I think it's a really good term. It's like you put on an exoskeleton on your legs and it allows you to run a little bit faster. That's what an agentic harness system is. It just allows your knowledge work to go a little bit further. Another great analogy is the loom, the automatic loom. When I went to Japan on a trip a few years ago, we went to the Toyota Museum, and Toyota as a company became famous because they created some of the first automatic looms. And so people were previously doing all the looming by hand. I don't know what the word is, looming. And then they invented an automatic one, and it completely revolutionized the making of clothes, such that instead of being expensive, time-consuming to make one of these, make it in hours instead of weeks. That's what agentic AI is. It is the industrial revolution for knowledge work. It is the machine. Would a loom, take my job? It might if all I was doing was looming, but it is.
You're not designing the clothes.
Thank you. And that's a beautiful example of the fact that that's been abstracted away from. We don't weave anymore, just like we probably won't code anymore.
But I think this existential angst about our children, right?
Yeah.
Something that feels very real for me.
Yeah.
I'm so grateful that I'm 38 when this has landed,
Yeah.
and so it hasn't been able to take hold and kind of rot me to my core in terms of
Yeah.
my ability to think normally about anything. And like thinking and coming up with stuff is just part of how we all operate, whereas we don't all loom. Our kids can just, I never did.
Yeah.
Our kids, what is it going to do to them and what do we do about it?
Well, I mean, we were worried about social media, and we rightly should be. This is going to be even worse.
Yeah.
So they're regulating social media, which is great. I'm glad Australia took like some initial steps on that. We'll have to do the same thing for AI.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I keep reading about some radical governments and politics spending lots of money trying to work the system so that AI gives them a better look and feel when questions are asked.
Okay.
Do you think that's possible? And how much would that spend to actually get to the point where an AI system will give them the answer they want?
Do I think what's possible, the use of AI in governance?
From governments or radical political parties to change the narrative in AI in their favour?
Oh, as in
Or produce content, so much content that's speaking favourably of them.
Well, that's what they've been doing that for years. I get all the mates to write a book review about the restaurant. That's the, basically.
yes.
About the spiky intelligence part.
Yep.
And talking about kids and learning. And it seems to me like you've been saying we need software engineers, we still need people who are going to think,
Yes.
put the scaffolding around it. The other side of it is we need the creatives.
Absolutely.
Right? Because we're the humans, are the novel thinkers.
Absolutely.
So how does that, I'm thinking, education, how does that link? Because that's two very different pathways, isn't it? That's kind of arts and theatre and drama and music and literature and software engineering.
I'm not saying that everyone becomes an AI wrangler. Obviously, if you have a propensity for it, if you like computers, if you're into tech, like, you should definitely do that because that is just a brand new career that emerged overnight and I think is really interesting, and obviously I'm interested in that. But not everyone needs to be an AI wrangler, and of course there are a huge number of skills and crafts and careers which can be very, very important. Creative is one of them. An LLM, by definition, finds the statistical middle road, and more than ever we need to be having original thought.
Yes.
Original thought is so rare and so important.
So we need to be training our children.
Yes, to think critically and thinking independently.
Think critically and be creative.
Yeah, so here's this cool AI tool, use it. It's most likely going to be wrong. Teach them critical thought from an early age, that kind of thing.
I mean, I think Josh is also an interesting example because, Josh's background is music and industrial design.
Yeah.
So very creative application of, very technical things.
Yeah.
And now he's gone into code.
Yeah.
So it's not like he's coming in at...
It's not one or the other.
Yeah.
Skills, curiosity.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely.
Guys, thanks for coming in on a rainy day. It's nearly 9 o'clock. That was an awesome discussion.